people are attracted by the sex and they stay for the community. So there are a lot of people in the lifestyle who don't actually have sex with other people. They might like the sexy scene, they might like to be voyeurs or exhibitionists. They might not even do that. They just like the community because this community is open-minded, it's sex positive, body positive, like everything positive. You're meeting new people all the time. I would say that is the dance also that really gets brought into ENM, is this dance of security and freedom, safety and novelty, and that dance too.
Welcome, Tribe. I'm Mayah Rose.
And I'm Gerald Rogers. We're about to embark on another mind-expanding episode where we dive deep into the realms of psychedelics, sex, and the superconscious.
This is a transformational experience of healing, manifestation, increased clarity, flow, and alignment.
So join us on this sacred journey as we receive the codes of transformation from scientists and psychonauts, shamans, tantra masters, mystics, and more.
Together, we'll unravel the secrets of plant medicine, sex magic, and other tools to tap into higher states of consciousness.
So why are we here? To answer the call, to share our passions, and to be advocates for alternative healing.
So get ready for a ride that transcends the ordinary and leads you to the extraordinary, because living a legendary life is not just a choice.
It's a sacred adventure.
Welcome back to Psychedelics, Sex, and the Superconscious. I'm Mayah Rose, and today we have a very special guest. She's a dear friend of mine, a relationship coach. She specializes in ENM. We're going to talk about what that means in just a moment. She's also the author of the book For Better or Even Better, 7 Lessons on Love and Life from a Non-Monogamist. So Lauren, welcome to the show today.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. And I want to just jump right into this juicy topic of non-monogamy, because I know it's been around for a while. I've heard lots of podcasts, people talking about, there's lots of terms thrown around like lifestyle, open relationships, polygamy. I'd love to just start with, what does non-monogamy mean? What does it include?
Yeah, I'll do some quick definitions because I do throw a lot of terms around that will be helpful. So one thing to understand is that ENM, ethical non-monogamy, is an umbrella term. And so that actually doesn't tell you a lot about the people other than they're in some version of open. So some of the kind of generic terms are ENM, which is ethical non-monogamy, CNM, which is consensual non-monogamy, or just open relationships. And so you'll hear all those. But then you have to ask the question of sort of how they operate. And that's where you hear the term polyamory on one end of what I think is kind of a spectrum, which is we're in this for multiple emotionally committed relationships. And on sort of the other end is swinging, which is we're really in this for sex and friendship. And then there's really everything in between, because everyone's creating what really works for them. So you'll hear a lot of people be like, well, we're mostly poly, but we kind of do our own thing. Or we're swingers, but we kind of do our own thing. And my favorite one recently was, we're only poly at Burning Man.
Oh, that's funny. That's hilarious. Well, one of the reasons why I wanted to have this discussion with you today and have you on this podcast is because of the work that you've done in relationships. And I think there's a common misconception that people who choose to be non-monogamous are people who are dissatisfied with their relationships. They're wanting to escape. They're somehow some kind of like sex addicts that are just looking for more sex. And I want to just debunk all of those myths, because what I found from participating in your communities and facilitating at your retreats, and one of the reasons I'm having you facilitate at one of our retreats, which is not a non-monogamous retreat, is that you have this deep understanding of relationships and how they work. But let's just start with debunking what and why people are in the ENM community.
Yes. So I say it more like this, and this is surprising to some people, that we are in such a solid relationship and things are so great between us. What else is there? And so I think that is the best time, and that is the healthiest time to go into ENM. Are there people who try to go into ENM when their relationship is failing for some reason? Yes, because they're like, okay, last-ditch effort, let's try opening our marriage. And that is going to make things end actually more quickly. And I think that's where this myth comes from, because these are the the cases that people sort of hear about more, like, oh, we know about this couple and they went in it for 6 months and, their relationship was over. Well, I always want to ask, what was the state of their relationship before they tried? And the other thing about that solid foundation is, the thing that ethical non-monogamy does is it is complicated. You have to be a very emotionally mature person. And it will highlight things in your current dynamic. Like, we thought we had the most solid relationship. Oh, I do have these insecurities. Oh, maybe I haven't really healed this wound. It might bring up stuff in the form of like relationship stuff. And it is the commitment, the acknowledgement of those little cracks in the foundation, I like to call it, and the fixing of those things together that really have people then feel even more solid. That's why my book is called For Better or Even Better, because everyone already feels like they have this amazing relationship when they start exploring this. And then at some point they're like, wow, this is even better.
So it's kind of like ENM, ethical non-monogamy, is magnifying whatever already exists and then shining a light on those little cracks or those triggers or maybe those things in the relationship that need to be or to need to have a light shown on them anyway to make the relationship even stronger. And I think it's important, and I want to point out this difference and talk about this a little bit. There is a difference between non-monogamy and ethical non-monogamy. And I know these terms can kind of be thrown around, but tell me a little bit more about that, because I think that's kind of what you're saying, the difference between non-monogamy, which is just like, we're just going to go try something, or I'm just going to go out there and do something, or I'm going to go have an affair, versus like ethical non-monogamy.
Yeah, so in the community, especially, you'll hear people and me say non-monogamy. It's a mouthful, non-monogamy. That's why I switched to ENM. But, the reason that we sort of drop the ethical or the consensual is because that is implied for us in non-monogamy. Because if that part is not in place, we already have terms for that, which is cheating or affairs. So the ethical really is, and one of my little taglines is, ethical non-monogamy can be anything you want it to be, as long as everyone knows about it and everyone is consenting.
Mm-hmm. I like that. And there's something interesting. We were having a discussion recently, and you brought this up, that actually statistics around people having affairs are much higher in a like committed relationship where people just aren't talking versus an ethically non-monogamous relationship where people are talking and they're exploring together. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on this and why this is, and kind of what leads people to cheat versus why people in the ethical non-monogamous community are able to stay in this good relationship for longer, or maybe statistically have a greater success of being in a committed relationship, or I won't even say committed relationship. How do you want to say it? In a good relationship with each other, versus somebody who maybe is in a marriage that's committed, but they aren't able to talk about things, or they aren't able to explore together. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is such an interesting topic in our community because it's puzzling. Why in our culture it's not deemed okay to cheat, in the sense that it does end a lot of marriages, or it's not looked on favorably, or and coming from Utah, you hear a lot of stories about what happens within the Mormon church if you are caught cheating. So it's not looked on like it's okay. But we as a culture accept that through time, this statistic stays high. There's a book called Sex at Dawn by Christopher Ryan. And it's more from the science community, really questioning whether we are a monogamous species. And so I think there are lots of reasons that monogamous relationships, we can talk about sort of church and oppressive reasons, but also economic reasons that people were monogamous in the past. And as that freedom has opened up, we've just never changed the model. And so I think some cultures have just accepted to different degrees that cheating is okay. And we're like, hey, over here, like there's another way. Like you can still not be monogamous and still have a very strong relationship. And It just has a lot of stigma. People are afraid. I'm just gonna say people are afraid of ENM. I think there are lots of reasons for that, but culturally, we haven't quite gotten the recognition of there is another way to operate. And maybe to your point, actually, that it's already a hard conversation to even talk about doing it a different way. I have people come to me all the time. Oh, I think, this sounds really fun. It sounds like something I'd like to explore, but I do not know how to bring this up with my partner. Well, the very first thing, it's actually really perfect because the very first conversation that you're going to have with your partner is going to be a very vulnerable conversation. And you right away get to practice how that's going to go and holding space and not being defensive and all the skills that really all couples develop or get better at when they're in non-monogamy.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things is Gerald and I have really explored our own relationship. And as we've taught about relationships and as people have asked us about ours, the one thing that we always come back to is this idea of radical intimacy, of being able to really share all of yourself with your partner, of taking off all the masks, sharing your desires, sharing your fantasies, sharing your fears. And when you can learn how to do that, you can really receive your partner and listen to them, even if you don't agree with them, or even if you don't want to enter into an agreement with them that you want to, share that same desire, it creates this radical intimacy, creates a space that I think all of us crave, which is just to be deeply seen and understood. And I think ENM is a great way to do that. As Jill and I have explored this in the past, things have come up that are triggers that are hard to talk about or that we're afraid to talk about because there's been guilt and shame or social conditioning around it. And as we find this safe space to explore and to discuss things, it's actually been really beautiful to help develop this radical intimacy in our relationship. But I want to really take this to like a personal level because I know you talk about this in your book. I know you've met with many couples. And what happens when one couple, one of the people in that partnership, they're excited, they want to explore non-monogamy. I often think that their partner might be afraid or think, why am I not enough? And I know you went through that very journey and you talk about it in your book. So I'd love to just discuss that with you a little bit more. What happened in your relationship and how did you get comfortable enough to start exploring and then to eventually even get to the point where now you're coaching about it?
Yeah. So I'll give the abbreviated version, but it was kind of two parts. So we had some friends that we met that were polyamorous at one point, and we were like, that's fascinating. Like, tell us everything. But we weren't interested in it at that time. We just learned about it. So then about 7 years later, when my husband was brought up, like, I feel like there's something more, kind of like I alluded to at the beginning of this conversation. And I said, well, what is something more? And I don't really know. And I said, do you want a girlfriend? And he said, I don't think so. I don't know. So we started exploring out of that. But of course, my first reactions were, am I not enough? Like, you want something more besides me? Are we not happy? I was like, literally like, are we getting a divorce? Like, is this a broad-sided like divorce conversation? He was like, no, 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 I am really happy. And so it took us, a little while of just exploring online or like what we're even talking about and getting really clear on how important our relationship was to each other. And it's not about fixing anything. It's not about not being enough. It's just like, what else is there? So we eventually discovered this book, which if people are interested is a great book to read, which is The Ethical Slut, which really kind of laid out all the options in the ENM world and how to do it safely, physically and safely, emotionally. And that kind of became kind of our guidebook at the time.
Well, and you talked about this before with me, but there's a difference when you're talking about ENM or when you're having a conversation with your partner, when you're first opening up to this between interest and curiosity. And I know you spoke about when your partner first came to you, your husband, and he said, hey, I want to explore this. You weren't necessarily interested in it, but you were curious about it. And that curiosity led to interest. Can you explain that a little bit more? What's the difference between curiosity and interest when it comes to ENM?
Yeah, I think interest is a little more evolved than curiosity. So oftentimes, as you said, there will be one partner that's like, hey, I know a little bit about this, or I've read a little bit about this, and I'm interested in exploring it, like for sure. Then oftentimes there's a partner that's like, what are you talking about? But as long as there's a thread of curiosity, because, curiosity did not, in fact, kill the cat. Curiosity is also, let's get curious about ENM. Let's get curious about each other. Let's get curious. Like, I think that word is the one I default to in so many relationship conflicts and conversations, because it's like, if you can just stop for a second instead of being like, oh, I'm not enough, be like, really? Why are you? That's interesting. What appeals to you about ENM? And just in that conversation, you guys might learn something about each other. And so, a lot of people say, how do we know if we're a good fit for E&M, or should we? And I'm like, it's actually very simple. Like, is one of you, first of all, are you not doing this to fix anything? And second of all, if one of you is interested or curious, and then the third and the second one, interested or curious. If someone can't even conjure a little bit of curiosity, then I would say, it's probably not worth pursuing. And like in my case, curiosity did lead to interest and then actually going into it, but it doesn't have to. And I think that's why people get scared of talking about it, because it's like, once we open that can of worm, it's just open.
Yeah.
It's just a conversation. It can be just conversations, and it never has to go anywhere.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really valuable point, this idea of, if you're feeling like you're not enough when a partner comes and has this conversation with you, it's actually more about your own security and the work that you need to do. And it doesn't mean that you have to say yes. It doesn't mean that this has to be right for you, but you shouldn't make that decision based on like you're not enough for that person.
Right.
The conversation and the decision should be based on, is this going to expand our relationship, or is this going to contract it? And on that note, I'm just curious, because I know this hasn't been a piece of cake. Like, the whole purpose of E&M, I think, in a solid relationship is that, like you said, it actually does shine light on some of the things that need to be addressed. So I'm just curious, what are some of the biggest challenges and then some of the biggest benefits that you've experienced personally, or that you've seen the people that you've coached with experience through E&M?
Yeah. So one other thought I want to finish on with what we were just talking about is, one of the biggest patterns that I see that emerges from people practicing E&M is that a little bit of a codependent. I'll put it in another term just so we don't get caught up in psychological terms, but like givers and takers. There's someone who's a little bit more of a giver in a relationship, but someone's a little bit more of a taker, and that can work for a long time. When this conversation gets brought up by the taker, the giver hears it as, here's something I have to do.
Mhm.
And it right away, that shines the spotlight on that dynamic. Like, whenever my partner asks of me, I need to say yes. And we don't always see it right away at that point, but I see it now at that point, because that's one of the dynamics that can definitely emerge. Now, in terms of the challenges, I would say the biggest challenges are that I think there's very often a giver and taker, and what I now call the constant dance between courage and consideration. So there's a definition of emotional maturity from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People that I found that I love this definition because it's so simple. And it said it's the balance of being in your courage, speaking your truth, and considering how it affects others. And so I really see E&M as this dance of consideration and courage. And just like the giver and taker, you're going to find out which one in the relationship stands more in their courage and which one generally stands more in consideration. And so you can do that dance a little more consciously once you start to realize that that is there. It's also challenging to get to that place to realize, that is happening. Of course, a lot of people think jealousy is the biggest challenge. I would actually, I think jealousy gets the most attention, but I think jealousy can be worked through, and also is probably the biggest opportunity to get curious with yourself in that situation. And then I would say and the other challenge actually is what you alluded to is the pace also. If one person's interested, one person is just curious. You get into it. One person really likes it. One person's like still not sure. And it always has to go by the pace of the slower person. That's just how it has to work because we're trying to increase our comfort zone. The way we increase our comfort zone is like, let's try something and it's probably a little bit outside of our comfort zone. Then if that's good, maybe next time we can go a little bit further. But if we go too far out of our comfort zone, people just kind of jump in and something doesn't go well, we constrict. And when we're more fearful. So going at the pace of the person who's has, a smaller comfort zone is an absolute must. That alone, staying at a pace where everyone's comfortable. And I say, it brings a lot of discomfort. We're signing up for discomfort. We're signing up for awkward. But that dance can also bring us closer together because you feel safe and you're building trust this whole time. Now, the payoff is incredible amounts of connection, incredible amounts of friendship and community. So one thing I say, especially on the swinging end, and swinging also goes by a term called the lifestyle. One thing I say, especially about that end, is people are attracted by the sex and they stay for the community. So there are a lot of people in the lifestyle who don't actually have sex with other people. They might like the sexy scene. They might like to be voyeurs or exhibitionists. They might not even do that. They just like the community because this community is open-minded. It's sex positive, body positive, like everything positive. You're meeting new people all the time. This is one of the chapters that I talk about in my book. And this is what we thrive on as humans. Now, as adults and in our culture, we start making fewer friends sort of as we go throughout life and get busy with other things. And the lifestyle can really be an opportunity. And polyamory, also, obviously, there is a lot of crossover in that community where you're just meeting new people. And there's freedom and safety. I would say that is the dance also that really gets brought into ENM is this dance of security and freedom, safety and novelty and that dance too.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And there's so much to unpack there. So many things I want to comment on. I want to first start by saying one of the things that I've been so impressed with, especially as I facilitated at your retreats with this community that you've cultivated of these couples that are really in a great relationship, that are expanding, that are interested, or they're participating in these different forms of ENM, is that everybody's best friends. And they all just love each other and everything's okay. Like wherever you are, they're okay with it. Like you could say, yes, I want to have sex with you. Great. No, I don't want to have sex with you. Great. And nobody takes it personally. And it's just this feeling that I felt there of like, everybody has each other's backs. Everybody's celebrating each other. Everybody's happy to be there. And it's almost like as adults, there's this little part of us that gets like insecure or worried about certain things. And that is non-existent in these communities when people are fully participating and really understand what it is. So I just wanted to comment on that because I've been to communities all over the world, been to different, seminars, different groups, different retreats, and I've never experienced anything like that in any other community. So I just want to celebrate that.
Yeah. And I think it's because, two things. People at my retreats do need to have lifestyle experience. So they are well versed in the lifestyle world. Are there people who jump in and are not that way and not doing things carefully and not, emotionally mature? Yes, they would not be at the retreat. However, the other thing I'll say is that I think it's because we're just so vulnerable with each other. From the get-go, we are sharing, I always joke, I'm like, yeah, swingers don't talk about the weather. Like, we go out to dinner and we're talking about, oh, we had this experience and that experience, this good experience, that experience. And we're like sharing these things. We're like, oh my God, can you believe I did this? Like you're sharing these things with people in ultimately maybe ending up in some intimacy with these people right away, right? It doesn't mean you're going to be best friends forever, but you might be best friends that night, and you might definitely carry on a friendship. And I think that's the thing that surprises people the most, actually, because a lot of people are attracted to it for the sex. And then they get in it and they're like, oh, yeah, this is what I was actually looking for, is the community.
Yeah. Well, and I want to go back to this idea that you talked about with courage and confidence. And one of the ways that I've heard it explained that I really like is in any partnership dynamic, usually you'll find one partner that's more committed to the we and one partner that's more committed to the me. And this just actually works in a partnership dynamic as long as each partner recognizes it, and as long as they value that the other person is, the one that's focused more on themselves. And another way to even look at this is, again, the freedom and safety and security. And I think this can shift over different times where one person might feel one way and one might feel another way, but usually one partner in a relationship values freedom over safety and security, and usually one partner values safety and security over freedom. So it's just helpful to understand, identify that. And actually, one of the formulas that you use, and I think this is great for people that are in the ENM community and people that aren't, like anybody that's in a relationship, you have this framework of these 3 A's that are really valuable, that actually foster radical intimacy and open communication in situations where a couple might be going in and feel uncomfortable. And these could range anywhere from a lifestyle retreat to a family reunion. So I'd love for you to share those 3 A's and then how couples can use those both in the ENM community and outside of it as well.
Yes. Okay, so I will use, example for my husband and I to illustrate, and then we can talk about how that expands. So say my husband and I are going to go to a lifestyle party on Saturday night. So the first A is alignment. And everyone thinks that's getting in alignment with your partner. That's actually getting in alignment with yourself, which, by the way, we haven't talked about this yet, but the whole thing about testing your relationship is getting really clear on your relationship with yourself also through ENM. And so alignment is, what do I want to get out of the party this weekend? And I'll use some shocking ideas just for shock. So let's say I'm like, ooh, I would like to find maybe a single guy, and we could do like a threesome with my husband and me and the guy. And that, I don't know, that sounds fun. We haven't done that in a long time. Okay, so that's the alignment piece for me. So then I get together with my husband. He shares his alignment. Maybe he's like, we haven't met a new couple in a really long time. I would just love to really meet a new couple. Oh, okay. So then right away we realize that, first of all, we're bringing our own expectations to consciousness, because sometimes we don't even know what our own expectations are, right? Now we have discovered we have a differing expectation. So had we not talked about it, maybe I would have gotten to the party, even subconsciously, and started talking to more men. And maybe he would have gotten to the party and started talking to couples. And then at some point, there would have been some divergence in what we're getting out of this evening. So now we know that we have this differing expectation. Like, oh, okay, you know what? You are right. We haven't met a new couple in a long time, and I'm okay. Let's do that. Let's meet a new couple instead. Or just as easily, he could have been like, oh, yes. You're not always up for that. I'm always up for a threesome like that. So let's do your idea. So this is sort of the negotiation place, or the courage and consideration place, where you're doing the dance of like, okay, how are we going to come to agreement? Sorry, I didn't say that. It was the second A. So the first one's alignment with yourself. Second one is agreement with your partner. The other thing I want to say in this section of agreements is, in the ENM world, we use terms, boundaries, and agreement, meaning really, how do you frame your operations? Like, how in your couple do you operate within this community? Lots of people do have boundaries. And I want to distinguish rules from boundaries from agreements really quickly. So some people will call them rules, and rules are something that we impose on someone else to keep them safe. So rules don't really have a place in ENM. We're all adults. Rules are something really more that you would give for children. Boundaries are something that I would put in place to keep me safe. And that's fair, but there's room for people may honor the boundaries and they may not. And that's all kind of up to me to uphold. Agreements is the term that I like to use, even though it's not as popular, because an agreement is like you might have a boundary, but your partner is like, yes, I agree that we're going to operate that way. And so now you're in agreement going into these situations. And if something goes outside of that, that's a different conversation to say, hey, why did you break my boundary versus, hey, why did you break our agreement? Because that's the first thing you want to bring to it is curiosity. And so in this second A, in the agreement phase, I also really recommend that couples who are operating with agreements to revisit your usual agreements, because especially when you're in it for a while, you kind of get, yeah, we do this, we don't do that. You get a little lax these days. But let's say I had a really hard week at work. And I am like, I know what we normally play at these parties, play equal sex, by the way, but I am not up for it tonight. Like, I just don't have the energy. I'm really tired. And I just want to meet people and talk and socialize. Okay. So here again, in this agreement stage, huge expectation miss, right? Like if we usually play, and I hadn't really thought about it for myself until we got into the situation, then there would have been another expectations mismatch. So this agreement stage can mean kind of lots of things, but it's like, hey, what are we wanting to get out of this night? And then the third A is affirmation, because you cannot affirm your partner or your relationship too much. So it's like, I am so proud to walk into a party with you every time. You just light up the room, and I love being on your arm. Or you know what? What happens tonight? I can't wait to go home together tonight. You're my favorite person in the world. And so that can never happen too much. So it's align with yourself, agreement with your partner, and then affirmation.
I love this. And I think this can be used in so many ways. And what I love that you said about this is, first of all, doing this regularly is really important, because you may shift or you may change. I mean, we're both women. I can change from day to day. One day I can feel more open and expansive. The next day I'm contracted. And so really having this conversation regularly is important. And then I love what you said about the agreements, because again, this isn't about us as individuals. We're coming together, we're uniting as a couple. We're taking into consideration each person's individual desires. And now we're deciding what is best for us as a couple moving forward. And is really beautiful too. So I love that framework. And okay, so now I want to get, Lauren, into another kind of maybe juicy or even taboo topic, which is psychedelics and ENM.
Yeah.
So I've been to a lot of different ENM communities. I think in general, the ones that I went to are also people who are curious, interested, or even participating in psychedelics. And I think there's some important things when it comes to psychedelics and sex in general, just when you're mixing those two things together.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're mixing community with psychedelics, ENM, sex. So I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on this? Do they have a place in the ENM community? Do they not? How do people navigate that? What are your thoughts on this?
Yes. So I know that in the psychedelics community, it is controversial to mix sex. And in our community, there's a different relationship with sex. This is something we're very well versed in, I would say, more so than the general population. And at my retreats in particular, where we do mix, it's all about the safe container, right? And that is consistent everywhere. It's all about the safe container. So we're also just creating a safe container, but with this added aspect, which we are already well versed in. And so on their first night, everything is about connection and friendship and creating between people. People will ask me, lifestyle people that I'm interviewing for the retreats, they'll say, do people play at the retreats? And I said, do they? Probably, sure. I'm not in charge of playing. I'm in charge of connection. So I'm creating connection for the group so that everyone feels safe with each other. That journey happens on the second night. So then, same thing during the day, we're doing relationship workshops. We're going for a hike. We're just doing things to keep all the momentum going towards this journey that we all know is coming up. Then before we drop in, before the journey, I have a little paper that I have people sign. It's either we are open to playing with other couples or we're not open to playing with other couples.
And when you
If
say
they,
playing with other couples, what does that mean? Just in case there's somebody on here that doesn't quite understand that.
so playing usually means sex. And I love that you asked that question because everyone needs to ask that question. What does playing mean to you? So that's just the general wording on the sheet. Then if they say we are open to playing with other couples, of course they don't have to play once they're in journey. They have the option yes or no. You always have the option yes or no. I think that's another thing about misconception about swinging and lifestyles, that you're somehow obligated or expected, something's expected of you. But if you say no, we're not really open to playing with other couples, then I'm not going to let you change your mind in journey. And I am really clear with people like, hey, journey space is not the same as getting really drunk. We're not out there making terrible decisions. But regardless, that's the way I think everyone is going to feel safe. And we have the paper, but also we sit around and we talk about it in a group. So we know that that couple is playing. We know that one is not. And we now know what that means to them. So going into the journey, it's all about that safe container.
Yeah, I love that. And a couple of things that really came up for me as you were sharing that is, first of all, lifestyle ENM has been one of the best and safest ways for me to practice saying no without feeling rejection. And that's something I always struggle with. Even just when I was younger, I was taught, or I took on the belief that I was never to say no to a man, or that I couldn't say no, especially in a sexual situation, without feeling shame or guilt or somehow be made to feel wrong. So actually, when I participated in the ENM community, it's been really healing for me. And the most healing parts have not come from those experiences where I've said yes, although they've been really fun. They've come from the times where I just honored myself and said no.
Same.
So, and I think that's true in the psychedelic space as well, is that nobody should enter into a psychedelic experience unless they're a full fuck yes for it. And if it's not a fuck yes, then it's a fuck no. And it's almost like combining these two gives like a double opportunity for that. And what I love too is, I think this is important both with ENM and psychedelics, and especially when you mix the two. And as I mentioned before, I've come in and actually facilitated at your retreats, which is that if somebody decides that they aren't going to do something or they aren't comfortable with something before they take the psychedelic, then whoever's creating the container or the other people in the container should always honor that. Like, you cannot change your mind once you are now under the influence of a psychedelic. Like, if you say, no, I'm not going to do this, I don't feel comfortable with it, this is not the way I'm choosing to participate, then you take the psychedelic and you're in it and you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe I changed my mind. It's like, no. But if you go into it and you're like, well, I think I'm a no, but I might be open to it. So that's what I'm going to say. Well, I think I'm a no, but I might change my mind in that space. Then you take the psychedelic and you're in it and you're like, you know what? I've changed my mind. I want to do this. Then great. We can honor that. But I think there's a couple points here. First of all, it's just always checking in with yourself before you're in any container. Is it a fuck yes or is it a fuck no? And thank goodness the EFM, that's my term for epic fucking magic.
It totally applies here too, by the way.
The ENM community really, especially in your containers and in any ENM community that somebody would want to participate in, I would just highly suggest participating and finding a community that's going to honor your no and not make you wrong for it. And the same with the psychedelic community. Like, you should be in containers and you should be in places where people are going to honor what you agree to before you enter into that container and really help you with that.
Yeah. And I think that's just raising a really important point about the ENM community also, which is, I think, when for sure I did too, when we think about this ENM community, and let's kind of say dating again, but with our partner, maybe. I mean, some people date separately within ENM, polyamorous people do, lots of separate things. But, more pure swinging, you're still doing it as a couple. But whatever model you're in, we are imagining sort of the dating scene, I guess, that we knew when we were single, or if we're still single, we're imagining the same thing. The way that the ENM community operates is so different from our culture at large. And I love watching people recognize this because there's a couple things. One is, yes, this idea of respect and consent. Is it perfect? No. Is it way better than a vanilla? Vanilla is the term for anyone not at E&M, by the way. Is it way better than a vanilla club? Yes. It's a different kind of environment, and people don't necessarily realize this. The thing that's the most amazing to me is that women are the center of the ENM world. This takes a minute for women to realize this because, like you said, we think we have to say yes all the time, or we bring in all of these sort of notions, or, we're afraid to put ourselves out there sexually. We're afraid to flirt because in the real world, if we just flirt with someone, we don't know what we're instigating. We all sort of have this experience in let's say our younger dating world where we flirted with a guy and then he doesn't leave us alone for the rest of the night or something. All those things fall away. Women are at the center. And when I say at the center, also in the sexual experience world. So you and I talk all the time about the masculine and the feminine. And what people realize pretty quickly on or convert to, and some people have trouble with this, the feminine is the sexual center. The masculine is there to support this energy and be a container for this energy. And that is their pleasure, is being the center, or at being that, the container for that. And in our culture, we have learned that men's sexual needs are at the center of everything, and that we are here to serve men sexually. And this is in stark contrast to the way it really, when we're in healthy situations in the lifestyle. And I think a lot of men recognize that shift right away, or recognized it before, and that's actually was something that drew them into ENM. But, these containers are already very different than the ones we're imagining because we have this different shift. And I love watching the women go into this and then slowly step into that power. I said to someone the other day, they're really new, and I was like, I don't know if this means anything to you yet, but you're going to be stepping into some queen energy in the community setting. And she's like, oh. And I love watching the women step into it, and I love watching their partners love how they love watching their women step into that.
Mm-hmm. That's so powerful. And I really can say, and again, I think like in any situation, you can find communities that aren't aligned with this, or communities that are, people that aren't, or people that are. So this was kind of an overgeneralization, but
Yes.
I have felt more safe in the ENM community than any other community where there's been sexuality on the table. Because I know that people that are well-versed in that community, that respect it, that are deeply entrenched in it, they honor, like I said before, they honor the no and they honor the yes. And they wait for the invitation. And there's never any feeling like, oh, I have to do this, or I'm being forced to do this, or I'm going to disappoint somebody if I don't do this thing or that thing. It's just like there's a bunch of different options, and this is a safe way to explore it. And my desires are going to be honored, whether the desire is to participate or not. And that was probably the biggest surprise to me, in the past, as Gerald and I have had an ENM in our relationship. And then there's times when we haven't. And I want to bring this up too. I actually want to bring up this point because somebody was asking me the other day, she said, I'm getting into a new relationship and I don't know whether I want this relationship to be monogamous or non-monogamous for the rest of our lives. And I'm like, why do you have to decide if it's that way for the rest of your life? Can't you just decide moment by moment? And I think this is a really valuable point to bring up, because I think a fear that people have is if they agree to ENM with their partner, then they are committed to ENM for the rest of their lives. If they have an open relationship, then they are going to have an open relationship for the rest of their lives. And it's just not true. Gerald and I have gone through cycles where having a more open relationship has really expanded us. And then we found that we are more contracted and we want to close our relationship for a while. And it's all about just us talking about it and what do we want as individuals, but also what do we want for our relationship. And so I think it's really important for people to understand that if you say yes to this, it doesn't mean yes forever. And if you say no to it now, it doesn't mean no forever. There might be
Yeah.
a point or a time in your relationship. So how do you help couples navigate that?
Yeah, I mean, usually by the time they get to me, they've sort of gotten to that phase of like, okay, we're interested or curious. And I think well, for sure they're interested or curious, and oftentimes have had some experience. So they will dip a toe and have a couple experiences and go, oh, yeah, we really like this. But now how do we really incorporate this as, into our relationship and move forward in the healthiest of ways? So sometimes there's a little toe dipping first and then they come. And that is something that I remind people of all the time. You're right. It's like, it's this idea that once we go down this path, there's no going back. Well, there might not be going back, but there's turning back, turning to other paths. Because like I said, you're always creating. And I think when you are operating in this space of relationship, which is counter to our culture, you recognize that you have always really been in charge of creating whatever works best for your relationship, but we default to so many things because we have a huge default in our culture to monogamous relationships. We're not even really taught how to do monogamous relationships all that well. But now we're in this ENM world. We really get to create whatever we want. And we're really like consciously choosing these things, which is also like a teaching. We're teaching ourselves how to do this well along the way. And so that's why so many people at ENM feel like they have a stronger, better relationship. And like you said, we're going to decide as a couple to maybe take a break from this for a while. Or maybe we never want to do it again. Maybe it was just this phase for us. Or maybe we only do it at Burning Man. Just pick that one a couple. So it is just, I call everything conscious. I have a conscious couples immersion program, my conscious couples retreats, because you do want everything in your life to be consciously chosen. It's just that I think E&M can bring a new realization that we are creating our relationships at all times.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you said that. And I know that you've been on your own journey too, and would love for you to share as much of it as you feel called to share now. But I think one thing that happens is sometimes people's biggest fears are my partner's going to get too connected to somebody else, or they're going to fall in love with somebody else, and then I'm going to lose them. We aren't going to have the conversation. This is going to dissolve the relationship. And I know you went through an experience and learned how to navigate that, and just was wondering if you'd be open to sharing that experience and how you navigated it, and then where you are now as a couple in relationship to where you were during that time, or how you navigated to get to where you are.
Yeah. So the first distinction I want to make is like my husband and I have mostly operated in the swinger community. I would say more so in the swinger community, there is concern about developing too many feelings for somebody else. In the polyamorous community, this is not a concern. This is actually what we're in it for. So it's kind of, an expectation already. So my husband and I were in that realm. And we had a situation where there was someone that we were getting both equally close to, and then they took it a step, further than I was comfortable with, which they did fall in love. And, I think there's no formula for navigating that because every relationship is so different. And so in our case, what came out of that was my recognition that I'm the giver, that I am constantly trying to give, because I just really wasn't okay with it. My nervous system was not okay with it. I was, and because I'm a coach, especially, I was like, I have to get okay with this. And because he wants this, because they want this. I don't want to hurt them. I don't want to hurt him. Meanwhile, I was hurting a lot. But and this is a kind of a common ENM thing. We're like, oh, this is my own insecurity. This is my own jealousy. But you and I talked about it a lot. And I was like, I can't really work on this when I'm in the situation because the situation is too triggering for me. So I need to be out of the situation. And then maybe I can work on myself and the fear. And whether that was, getting out of the relationship with him or him getting out of that relationship with her, that was, to be determined. So that is what ended up happening. My husband and I stayed together. And was it painful? Yes. Was it painful for all of us? Yes. And also, what I recognized was, and you said it earlier, the biggest lesson was not me saying yes. It was me actually saying no, and that I have a limit and recognizing my own limit and disappointing others because I have this limit. And also recognizing, I think it was a big moment for me too in our relationship that I'm also going to be okay without this relationship. When I said I think people fear ENM, I think it's people fear that they can't live without their partner. And when you're practicing ENM in the healthiest of ways, it is this dance of freedom and security. Because here's the thing. We might be in situations where we're seeing our partner interact with others and, that might bring up some insecurities with us and whatever. But guess what? ENM community does not actually have a trademark on this activity. Your partner in a monogamous relationship, your partner could meet someone else at any time also. They could fall in love with someone else. They could have an affair. Statistically speaking, they might. And so we like to fool ourselves in monogamy that we are a little bit more secure than we really are. And so I think holding our relationships, I know this sounds really counterintuitive to some people, but holding our relationships a little bit more lightly, recognizing, the moment and this amazing relationship we have, and the more amazing relationship we create, the more we both choose to stay in it, not out of obligation or commitment or because we're married, but because we're choosing each other. And I think some people are afraid of testing that.
Yeah. And, to your point, I think that actually the ENM community can help you understand, like if I'm watching my partner have sex with somebody or knowing that they're having this intimate experience with somebody and they're coming to me and they still want to be with me and they're choosing to be with me, it's like, oh, they aren't just choosing to be with me for the sex because they can't have sex with anybody else. They're choosing to be in this relationship because they want to be with me. And I'm curious. I've thought about this a lot, and there's no way to tell because there's no way to actually do a comparison. But I've often thought that one of the reasons that you were able to navigate that situation in your relationship was because of all the practice that you had communicating through your experiences with having an open relationship at ENM and just being able to express how you feel. But what I want to focus on now is that after being married, how long have you been married for?
21 years.
21 years, and being in the ENM community for how many years?
8.
8 years. You actually called and told me the other day that you had the best experience
Oh, yes.
of your entire life, and it was with?
My husband.
So I'd love for you to share anything you want to share about that. But I think this is also a testament to, wow, you've had a lot of experience with a lot of people. You've been married for a long time. And here you are saying, wow, I just had the best experience of my life with my partner.
Yes. And I just want everyone to take a moment. Like, I've been in the community for a long time. I run a group called the Sacred Slut, so I identify as a slut. I've had a lot of sexual experiences, and this one was out of the world and did involve some substance. I had some THC that a different, brand than I had ever had before. So, of course, we always wonder how that happened. When I explain this experience, I was just explaining it to someone else yesterday. And I said, it actually belittles it to call it a sexual experience. It was actual, like, another dimension, or it's like having a psychedelic experience.
We can call it a transcendental experience.
Transcendental experience in which sex was the vessel that delivered me to this other place. And while we were having this, it was like, would I have been able to lean into the experience in the same way if I was with someone else for the first time? I'm going to say probably not. I think this is the reason that people do need to be thoughtful about mixing substances and sex in all the contexts like we were talking about, but also recognizing the safety and intimacy and what is possible when you put all of those things together. And I know a lot of people say this to me. There's a fear, well, what if we go out and have sex with someone else and they realize that sex is way better with somebody else? And what I want to say to that is, if you're really fearing that someone's going to go out and have the best sexual experience of their life, like I just did, with someone else on the first time meeting, I think what you're concerned about is that your sexual life with your partner is not as fulfilling for you or them as you want it to be. And maybe that's the conversation that you need to have before you go out and having sex with other people. Because I think whatever that experience was that I just had, and I could talk a long time about that experience, but I'm clear that it is the container, the partner, the safety of all of it, that all those things have to come together to really create those experiences.
Yeah. And I love that you've worked on cultivating this container of safety through your open communication and radical intimacy. Okay. Question.
Yes.
Do you think that during this experience, this transcendental experience you had, Lauren, do you think you had a cosmic orgasm?
Yes.
Do you think that your
No
orgasm
doubt.
connected you to the super conscious?
100%. I never even knew what you were talking about until that night. Then I was like, oh, this is the thing. And the way I'll describe that, and because I want to know if this is how you would describe your experience too, is like just having sex was like orgasm, like that level sustained. And then there was more orgasm on top of that, and more energy and more waves, and so much stuff coming in, like just being open to all the messages and all the things that were downloads. And that's what I mean. Like, that situation was a vessel for me to experience the other. It was not just a sexual experience.
Oh, and I love that you said that, because I think that's where really I use the term sacred union. And there's a couple of different components. First of all, when I say cosmic orgasm, there's actually a chemical reaction that happens in your body that allows for this DMT burst that's created through the orgasm, which then allows you to connect to the superconscious. It's like this antenna goes out through the orgasm, and suddenly there's this information coming in from God, the universe, the superconscious, whatever you want to call it, the information that's bigger than just ourselves. We aren't thinking about it. We aren't like, oh, I wonder what this is. It's just like, this is what it is. So that's exactly what you're describing. But I think it's important to note too that there's a couple of different really important pieces that are necessary in order to create a container for a cosmic orgasm. And I won't even say necessary. I'll say these components all help with that. So number one, being with a partner that you feel safe with. So you're in a safe container. And I know you had also mentioned that you have this experience at home. That's not fully necessary, but I think you said you had been with somebody else or been in a different place. If you've been in a new place where you didn't feel completely comfortable, then that might not have happened. Next, you were with your partner who knows your body. I mean, I know him. He can hold space for you. He's like this grounded, like masculine, like I can hold space, right? So you met your partner who you feel a sense of safety with. So in your comfortable place, you're with this partner you feel safety with. I think the psychedelics help. I'm going to be honest. I have had cosmic orgasms a larger percentage of the time when there's a psychedelic experience than without. And I think that's just because it's not necessary, but I think it's because it relaxes my body and takes a piece of me offline that might otherwise be worrying, if that makes sense. So I don't know if any of those make sense, or you want to add anything to that you felt like contributed to the container.
Yeah, so I do want to add to that because I think so. THC. So I am, unlike you, a person who has a harder time orgasming. And THC, and there's lots of studies out there too, can really help women with orgasm. And I think strongly it's about that little disconnection in the brain that then allows your body to just take over because, our brain is the biggest sexual organ. And so I was on THC that night. Also, the night before, we had done a small journey with the two of us, just like a gram of mushrooms and a little bit of THC that night too, and had amazing sex and also amazing conversation. So was there some carryover effect probably from a little bit of mushrooms the day before? I'm going to say absolutely. The insight that I had was actually just the other night when I was masturbating, thinking about that night, which was pleasure is a gateway past the ego as much as the psychedelics are. And I think when we are combining pleasure and psychedelics is just that much like a booster rocket, like to get past the ego a little bit, Does this make sense?
Yeah.
And so that was sort of my insight about pleasure too, because, when I was having that experience, and I don't know if you've ever had this, I had to consciously choose many times to surrender into the pleasure.
Yes.
Because I was like, I don't even know I can have this much pleasure. And also, like, is my body going to explode with this much pleasure? But also, here's the other thing that I've really noticed and other times too. There's so much cultural programming around pleasure. And that there must be something wrong with the thing that you're doing if it's bringing this much pleasure. And how many times I've had to go, oh, that's an interesting thought. I'm going to set this over here while I continue to be in pleasure because there's something in there that wants to stop us. And I think it's because that's our ego. That is our ego fighting back against pleasure because pleasure is another pathway to past the ego.
Yeah, I love that. I think there's as much fear around intense or extreme pleasure as there is around intense or extreme pain. I think as a human race, that is true. And we don't recognize it because why would we be afraid of pleasure? But it's the same thing of like, why aren't we all millionaires or billionaires? Why aren't we all like doing these things that make us happy all the time? It's just a programming and a story. And that's where the ego comes in. The ego is attached to some story or belief system. Like, this can't be okay. This isn't right. I love that you said that. I have yet to experience THC in lovemaking. Like, it's not been a psychedelic that's called to me very much, but after talking to you now, I've heard from multiple people. I don't like, this isn't making sense to me because of my experience on it. So we'll have to have more of a discussion offline about this. But
absolutely.
Definitely, that's my, two of my favorite things, sex and psychedelics. This is sex, psychedelics, and the superconscious being another one of my favorite things. So I'm glad we could talk about all of these topics today. And just as we wrap up, I just want to know, what is your final thought that you would share with those of us who are here listening to you and partaking your knowledge? What is the final message you want to leave with us today?
I would say, what conversation is it's worth having for every couple is just that curiosity piece. What do you think about ENM? Because my goal is not to convert people to ENM. My goal is for people to consciously choose whatever relationship they're in. So if you have a conversation with your partner, it's like, well, I think it's interesting, but not something I would ever be interested in. Me too. Or I think, I think that actually makes, kind of inspires me for us to work on our sex life a little bit, but I don't want to be ENM either. Now we're consciously choosing monogamy.
Wow, I love that, being in the consciousness of choice. And I think that's what fosters radical intimacy and great relationships. Lauren, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for going through these experiences, for sharing your lived experience, for helping others in their experience to find greater connection with their partners, with themselves, with the superconscious. So I really appreciate you. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, or they want to learn more about ENM, or they're curious, maybe someone's already in the community and they want to do some coaching with you, how can
Yeah.
they get a hold of you?
Easiest thing is swinginglifestylecoach.com. And there's a link to everything there. A lot of resources if you're just curious. There's a lot of free videos and guides and things. And I'm also Swinging Lifestyle Coach everywhere. So Instagram and Facebook and all of that.
Swinging Lifestyle Coach. Go check it out. I'm Mayah Rose, and see you next time on Psychedelics, Sex, and the Superconscious.
Thank you, legendary explorers, for joining us on this cosmic journey today.
Your curiosity fuels our exploration of psychedelics, sex, and the superconscious.
If you're hungry for more, dive into our website and connect with us on social media. All the links are in the show notes.
And stay tuned for our next mind-expanding episode. We can't wait to talk to you again in our next adventure.
Until then, remember, this is your life. So,
make it legendary.